Hey guys, sjws753 here, back with another video on why you should ignore SJWs and why they don't matter, and it's backed up by a true story. Flash forward about 2 years ago, well not 2 years, whatever time, I was in college. I was part of this art group where we talk about our ideas for movies, video games. A friend brought me in. I was doing a presentation on a character I created, Shinobi Switch Gender Ninja. He was a ninja who could manipulate his biological sex and wield it as a deadly form of martial art. Now at the time, the character was not intended to be political whatsoever. Nowadays I've changed the character a little bit so that he was more political, but at the time it wasn't meant to be that. When I was presenting this character, I got a lot of looks and said, wow, that looks cool, it looks amazing, just praise. By the time I finished, they suddenly changed their tone. They started saying, that's offensive. What about the LGBT community and the gender non-binary people and stuff like. I directly stated that at the time the character was not political. He was not meant to be associated with the LGBT whatsoever. He's not meant to be associated with that. He's simply just a character with crazy powers. I'll show the image of it later. I'll show the image of it when I edit the video. And despite having already said that, they still kept going on about it. It's offensive. It's offensive. It's like, you were just praising it earlier. Why is it a big deal now? In fact, I remember a few weeks before that, I did another presentation on another topic that you could see is actually offensive. Final Fate Family at War. It's about these two aliens who fight their 10 trillion brothers in a civil war over their sister. It was meant to be a dark parody of kids' cartoons and stuff. So if I thought if anybody's gonna be offended, they'd be offended. They'd be offended by Final Fate, by that thing. This, they were offended by for some reason. I just kept getting confused, and they kept mentioning, well, the LGBT community, which I already directly stated that it wasn't meant to be associated with it, and they kept saying people get offended by it. You do realize that the LGBT gender non-binary people, they're a very small percentage of the population. So even if they did get offended, which by the way, you can't speak on their behalf. Everybody in that whole video was straight. You can't speak on their behalf, so how do you know that they're going to be offended? It doesn't make sense. And even if they were offended, so what? They're a very small percentage of the population. You can't be super successful and care about people's feelings. And basically, their only criticism was that. They didn't say, there was no other criticism except people might get offended. It's like, I don't care. I don't care if people get offended. And so I'm trying to be respectful at the time, because now I just finished my presentation on it. I'm trying to say, well, how's the story itself? And I even said, who cares if people get offended? Just ignore them. I mean, I tried to say it the most respectful way possible, but that's basically what it said. And good saying, if this came out in the 90s, if this came out in the 80s, if this came out in the 2000s, nobody would make a big deal out of it. But suddenly, you came out today with something like that, and you come out today with something like that, and you get a bunch of people on Twitter ranting about it. And they just kept going on about that same topic. This might offend people. It's like, it might offend this super small percentage of the population. Maybe. This very small percentage of the population. The vast majority. When I show this same character to literally every other person, nobody else has a problem with it. I've told this to 40-year-old black dudes, I've showed this character to my whole family. I've showed this character to cousins. I've showed this character to dozens and dozens of people. Nobody had a problem except these guys. That's all. Nobody else has a problem except for these guys that I'm presenting to in this little art group. And by the way, these guys, my friend told me they were very, very, very left-leaning. Very left-leaning. That they were SJWs. My friend had already told me that. He's no longer my friend now, but we lost touch with each other after a while. And they just kept harping over that. People might get offended. I'm so sensitive. And it's like, how do you even know that people will get offended? How do you know that? There are particular things that set them off? Because everything I know about the LGBTQ people, this stuff like this doesn't seem to set them off. Then eventually, I stated in my personal opinion that I was against the LGBT community and I wanted the character to be separate from that. Something that I stated in the very beginning, this was not associated with those people. Suddenly, everybody just gets up and says, how could you say that? How could you say that? Why did you make this character? I literally just said it wasn't associated with that. I literally just said, how did you make the character? The reason I made the character was to test my art skills. By the time I was getting close to graduating, I was very attached to the character. But I already established that this was not in association with the LGBT. So when I created the character, I did not want him to be in association with the LGBT, which is what I established at the very beginning during the presentation. Yet they still kept harping on that. It's because, and nowadays I've realized that it's because they were attaching their own activism onto the character. They see they were so self-centered that they projected their own beliefs onto the character, and that's what they saw, even though I directly established that as an impossibility from the very beginning. So when I said that, and by the way, I remember exactly what it says. Well, I'm against the whole trans identity, homosexuality thing. In my opinion, you can disagree with you can disagree, we can both disagree. That's my opinion. I'm against that. I do not want this to be associated with that. That's exactly what I said. And they got up and said, how could you say, why did you make this character? I literally just said that it wasn't associated from the very beginning. And yet they still kept harping on it. Now I've realized that they were just being holier than thou. This whole activism thing, it's not about doing the right thing. It's about looking holier than thou in front of everybody else. That's why a bunch of actors are leaning on to that nowadays, because they want to seem better, because they're inflated egos. Either that or they have a bunch of skeletons in the closet to virtue signal. It's just a virtue signal. They were fake offended. Every other person I show switch the gender ninja to, they're not offended by it. But these guys are offended by it. It's fake. They're fake. And it's like, you need to ignore these people. We're talking about a small percentage of the population. And the people who ride for them are also another small percentage of the population. So the vast majority of people on the planet do not care about this stuff. They're just going to, oh well, and keep watching it. That's when I realized. So they actually kicked me out after I gave my very respectful opinion on that, which I shouldn't have needed to say since I already established at the very beginning it wasn't associated with that, but they still kept harping on it. And then I realized that they don't matter. They don't matter. It's like what Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers says. What he always says is that these people are fake offended and you just need to ignore them and they do not matter. Here's the thing. Here's the lesson you need to take from this. Every other person I showed this character to had no problem. Even my friend who brought me on this whole chat had no problem with it. It was only these leftists who were fake offended. They were fake. They were frauds. They weren't really offended by Switch Gender Ninja. They were trying to act as though they were, so they can seem holier now in front of all their friends. So they can virtue signal it wasn't real. They were acting offended when they really weren't. And these people, not only are they fake and cannot be appealed, they cannot be appealed. They're implacable, as the Bible says. But it's like what Jeremy says, just ignore these people and keep going. That's what you need to learn from all this. Ignore these activists, ignore them, and just keep going. In fact, here's the thing. My friend was actually kind of I'm not going to say his name for the sake of privacy. He was actually hypocritical since he was very anti-feminist. He did not like feminists, and he's made characters that were anti-feminist. But whenever it comes to present that in front of his friends, he never brings that up. Freaking coward. Me, I bring up stuff like this, and I'm seen as a bad guy. Wait, what happened to freedom? By the way, I got kicked out for saying my personal opinion that I'm against this stuff, and directly saying it's okay if you disagree with me. What happened to freedom of speech? If you're allowed to be pro that, I'm allowed to be anti that, and we can both respect each other. In fact, I've had friends that were Muslim, and I was a Christian. We got along fine. Despite the vastly different belief systems, but when it comes to this belief and your belief, I get kicked out for that. Bullcrap. Like and subscribe.